Hey everyone, welcome to Erased, your weekly true crime fix dedicated to telling the stories of missing and murdered women of color. I'm your host Mooney, and today we're going to be talking about the case of Veronica Reyes-Diaz. So let's jump into the case for this week, the case of Veronica Reyes-Diaz. Veronica Reyes-Diaz was a 23-year-old mother of three who on January 17th, 2020, went out to dinner with some friends. Veronica was later dropped off at home, went to pick up her sons, returned home, tucked her kids in, went back outside, and has never been heard or seen from since. Veronica resided in Dover, Florida, a suburb about 30 minutes outside of Tampa, Florida. She lived in a mobile home community with her husband Francisco Reyes and her three kids. Veronica was a stay-at-home mom who had desires to work, but according to family and friends, her husband Francisco didn't want her to. She was described by her sister as, quote, a great mom and, quote, there for her kids when they needed her. Per her father Fidencio, she was a, quote, daddy's girl and was the type of person who would give you the shirt off her back. She was described by one of her friends as friendly, expressive, and sociable, and she was quoted as saying, Veronica was an upstanding friend, always there for me when I needed her, and I was always there for her when she needed me. She would go out of her way to make sure the boys were well taken care of, and she even helped me take care of my daughter. She would take the kids to the park, spend a lot of time with them, and she was a great mother who loved her kids unconditionally. Her husband, Francisco Reyes, was almost 10 years her senior and described as her complete opposite personality-wise. He was from Mexico and didn't have much family in the U.S., and according to one of her friends, didn't speak much English. Francisco worked in construction, and according to family and friends, he wasn't super sociable with them and didn't have many friends outside of the family. Francisco was also described by the family as the type of husband who expected her to cook all the meals, make sure the house was always clean and in order, and have a plate heated up for him when he came home. On Friday, January 17th, 2020, Veronica had plans to go out to dinner with some friends. One was a friend of 10 or 15 years who Veronica had known since the 6th grade, and the other was a male friend who Veronica had a completely platonic relationship with. The plan was for them to go to Chili's in Tampa, which I mentioned before is about 30 minutes away from Dover. So Veronica dropped her kids, her two older boys, off with her sister who lived in Plant City, which was about a 15-minute drive from Dover. She then returned home and was picked up by her friend later that evening. Her husband stayed at home and watched their youngest son. On the way to Chili's, Veronica and her friend picked up their male friend. And once they got there, per her friend, she was getting angry phone calls from Francisco all night, telling her that she needed to come home. Her friends also said that during dinner, she expressed that she was reluctant to return home because she anticipated an argument between her and Francisco. One of her friends would also later say that arguments between Veronica and Francisco were not all that uncommon. However, it had never escalated to physical violence. However, on the podcast The Vanished, Veronica's mom stated that the other friend she was with that night had reached out to her and told her that Veronica had confided in him, and he had said that Francisco had in fact, quote, hit her, unquote. Around 1 a.m. on Saturday, her friend dropped her back off at home. Her friend said she noticed that the kitchen light was on, and according to her, they regularly left the stove light on overnight, but not usually the kitchen light. She said otherwise everything in their immediate surroundings was very quiet and, quote, looked normal, unquote. Veronica immediately hopped into her truck without entering the residence, and her friend said the last thing she saw of her was her SUV headlights and then darkness. On her way to pick up her boys, Veronica got pulled over by the police for a broken taillight, and we know this because she texted her friend around 1:05 a.m. to let her know. Per her father, she only received a warning and no ticket, and Veronica eventually made it to her sister's house to pick up her kids. Veronica then went home and tucked her 2 oldest boys into bed around 1:45 a.m. At this time, her husband states he was asleep in the other room with their youngest child when Veronica got home. But remember how Veronica's friend said she saw the lights on in the kitchen? Veronica's friend would also later report that Francisco had sent a text to her at around 12:30 a.m., and Veronica got home around 1 a.m. So it's possible that he could have fallen asleep within that 30-minute time period, but unlikely. Her 2 youngest sons would then report that they heard their mom go back outside, but they never heard their mom come back inside. Her friend said she was expecting a check-in text saying that she had made it home safely, but she never got anything. She even sent a text the next morning, but again, never heard back. Her husband claims he woke up the next morning around 6:30 a.m. and could not find Veronica. However, he noticed that the family car was still there. Their car was a red Chevy Yukon, and when he inspected the vehicle, he noticed that Veronica's keys, purse, wallet, and cash were still inside the vehicle. However, her phone was nowhere to be found. Alright guys, well thanks for listening to Erased. Before we go, if you found this podcast generally enjoyable, please show some love by subscribing and or leaving a review on Apple Podcast. It would be greatly appreciated. Also, if you have any cases you would like to suggest for an upcoming episode, please email the pod at erased.podcast@gmail.com or reach out on social media at the links provided below. Alright guys, love you, and stay tuned for next week's tale of a woman erased.